Yes, so we had a conversation last time where I made mention to us that actually the costs can be classified in different ways, right? We say that there are those that we call the fixed costs, right, that do not change even if there is a change in the level of activity or the level of production, right? Call them the fixed cost. We also have got the variable costs that change as the level of output does change. We had time to talk about the the other types of costs that we call now the semi-variable costs. These are more important. Now, about the semi-variable costs, we say that they have a mixture, of the fixed cost plus the variable costs. So there is a mixture of the fixed costs plus the variable costs put together. Then we have what we call the semi-variable cost. Now, there is a need for us to separate these two, right? We need to be able to separate the fixed costs from the variable cost when we are given the semi-variable cost, because the cost will just come as the whole, like just as the cost, total cost. But we know that within that same cost, right, there is a part which is what? Fixed. And the other one is a variable. Is that clear?
Yes, it is.
Hello? Now, there are different techniques that are used to make sure that we separate the fixed cost from the variable cost when you're given the total cost, as long as the cost that you're dealing with is semi-variable. One of the well-known method is called the high-low method, right? The high-low method. Now, the high-low method actually picks out the highest and the lowest activity level from the available data, right? It picks the highest and the lowest levels of activity, and then it does investigate the costs which has actually occurred between those. That's what it does. So you look at the data that you've been given or the level of activities. That should be the outputs, that has been produced. Remember how we defined the level of activities last time, that we are just referring to the outputs produced in units, usually. So now that is what we have. So we go ahead, we have that. So the first thing that we have to do now, listen carefully. Whenever we are given the total costs, for example, we are given this data, there is a total cost, activity levels, and the periods, right? Periods from, in this case, these are months from January up to June, it's about 6 months, right? Of about 6 months. Okay. So now the 6 months that we have been given here, we have got the months where we had the highest level of production, and also the months when we had the lowest level of production. There is a month when we had the highest cost and the lowest costs. You're following, right? That's the message we are sending. Are we
Yes,
good up to here? So now, how do you separate the fixed cost from the total cost? Remember, these are just total costs, but within these, there is one amount that is fixed. Okay. So how to go about this is to understand that total cost always is calculated by saying fixed cost plus the variable costs, right? That's how we find the total cost, isn't it? We consolidate what is fixed plus what is variable. Once all that has been done, we need the understanding that the variable costs, for us to come up with the variable cost, we got to multiply the variable cost per unit, right? Let me just write like this. This is a variable cost per unit multiplied by the level of output. Let's call the level of output X. You get it, right? So there is a fixed, now the variable cost per unit it's usually fixed, right? It's some fixed component. So you got to multiply the variable cost per unit multiplied by the levels of output. And that does give you the variable costs. So the variable cost shall be the sum or the product of the variable cost per unit and the level of output. Is that clear now?
yes, it is, sir.
Then for that reason now, we can quickly replace in here where there is variable cost and just put variable cost. Let me just say VU. This is variable cost per unit times the X. Let's put X to represent the level output. So this is how we find the total cost. Okay. Now, see, when we are given the total cost, since we already have the total cost, okay, we already have the total cost, then the fixed cost shall be there is fixed. The first thing that we need to do is to find the variable cost per unit. Did you get that one? We look for variable cost per unit. Okay, this fixed number. Because if you have the variable cost per unit, then your total cost shall always be given by fixed cost. Let's say the fixed cost is 100, for example, plus let's say the variable cost per unit that you have found is 2 times X. This will be the equation that you'll be using to find the total cost. It will be just plugging into this number where there is X with the level of output, then you have the total cost. Okay, so the number that is more important here that we're looking for is the variable cost per unit. Did you get that one? The variable cost per unit.
Yes, sir.
Now, how do we find the variable cost per unit? That's our question. That's where we start from. So the variable cost per unit is very easy to find. What you do is you just take the highest, identify the highest level of activity divided by highest level of, it is total cost, the highest cost divided by the highest, let's say highest cost minus the lowest cost divided by highest level of activity, which is the output, right? The level of production minus the lowest level of activity, like that. That gives us the variable costs per unit. Do you get it?
Okay, trying to understand it. Okay, so you said variable unit, variable
Cost per
cost
unit.
per unit, okay,
Mm-hmm.
is equal to high cost,
Yes, minus lowest cost
lowest cost, okay,
and the highest
divided by the
output,
output
highest
minus
lowest
lowest
output.
output. All right. Okay,
Yes.
thank you, sir.
So identify the cost. Which one is the highest cost here? These are the costs. Which month do we have the highest cost?
Uh, February.
Okay.
February, where we have
Mm-hmm.
41,150.
And when do we have the lowest?
The lowest is it's in May, where we have 36,250.
Okay. So what about the level of activity? When do we have the highest? Obviously, it's still in February, isn't it? And the lowest is
In
still in
February,
the
yes.
same May. So
May,
now,
yes.
so let's go. What is the highest cost? The highest cost, you write it, 41,150 minus the lowest cost is 36,250
36.
divided by the highest activity,
2,450.
minus the lowest
2,450.
activity, 1,750.
1,750.
Okay. This is looking for the variable cost per unit. And what do we find? You can do your computation, and give us the final variable cost per unit.
Okay. 41,950 minus 36,250. Okay, so on top we have 4,900.
4,900. Okay.
Yes. Then 2,450 minus 1,7. Sorry. Minus we have 700.
700.
Yes.
Okay. I have 700. So what is the variable cost per unit?
By 700. It's 7.
Okay. So 7, let's say these are kwachas. That would 7 kwacha per unit. It's a variable cost. So therefore, when you're defining the total cost, in that case, your total cost shall be the fixed costs, which is fixed, plus the variable cost per unit times the units, X for the units, isn't it? You agree with me, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So now, to find the fixed, it is very easy. To find the fixed cost, now it has become easy. How do you go about it? Just choose any level of activity, even the highest or the lowest, or any. Just choose any total cost from the total cost that you have. Which one are you choosing? Is it for the highest or for the lowest or for any?
For the highest.
Total cost is 41,150. That should be equal to the fixed cost plus 7 times the units. What were the units at this cost?
The
Two
units.
four. 2450, right?
2450. Yes.
Think that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we can go ahead now and look for the fixed costs. Make the fixed cost the subject of the formula. It shall be 41,150 minus the 7 times the 2450, isn't it?
41,150 minus 7 by 2450. Okay.
So that the fixed cost is equal to how much?
Okay, let me just compute. $1,150. $24,000. If not mistaken.
24,000. Oh, this was dangerous level. You've seen, eh? There was a lot of fixed costs. You've seen.
It was too much.
Looking at the costs. So anyway, if it's the level of production, we would not really, recommend, because there is a lot of the fixed costs. We don't need the businesses where or the productions where the fixed cost is just too much, because it's dangerous. You get the point, eh? That's how you find the fixed cost. For that reason now, the total cost shall be found by what? The total cost, therefore, shall be found by the fixed cost, which is 24,000, plus 7, which is the fixed cost per variable cost per unit, times X, and the X is for the level of output. If you want now, it simply means that in each of the fixed costs, there is a 24,000. If you want, you can repeat this using the different cost as well. Even the lowest, it will give you the same figure. Understand, right? If you want, you can replace here where there is fixed cost or the total cost now used for the lowest, 36,250. And what were the units at the lowest? 1,750, right? Is it? Hello?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, have you followed now?
450.
You have used the smallest units now, the smallest.
Oh,
So what is the fixed cost?
okay. Okay, let me just compute. 36, 250 minus 7. Sorry.
Hello?
24,000.
24,000. You've seen that at each level of the cost, you have the fixed cost of 24,000. That's what I meant, that you can pick any of the fixed costs or of the total cost, then you'll be fine. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Now, having said all this, which simply means that at each level, if we can ask for, would want to ask for what? For whatever the total cost at each level of output, we can manage now to actually bring out that, isn't it? Given the equation. Because if you ask you what is the total cost when the units are maybe let's say 3,000, it will just be 24,000, which is already fixed, plus 7 times the 3,000 units. You get it, eh? Then you multiply. You get what I mean, eh? So if you ask you, when the units now are 3,000, what will be the total cost? You can go ahead now and capture it, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So you understand, eh? So this is the equation actually. Okay. So that's what usually happens. Okay. So you can now, because this one is more like a predictor now, like or it's an equation that you can use to make the predictions. So you want to predict how much you can spend, right? How much will be the total cost at whatever level of output, let's say 5,000 units, then you can just plug into the equation and get the answer. You okay?
Yes, I am.
That is the idea behind the high-low method. Nothing much, nothing less. So usually the way how the question is asked, you're told to find the fixed cost. If I ask you in the test, find the fixed cost, you know the process. And then B, we can ask you now, what will be the total cost at this level of output? Let's say maybe at 200 units. You should be able to make a prediction using the equation that we have used. Are you good? Hello?
Very good, sir. Very good, sir.
Okay. So this is the idea behind actually the celebrated high-low method. You need this, see, even where we are going. So you need to pay attention to that. Thanks.